Prepare to meet thy God!
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full IT Welcome to Derry episode 4 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, WTF moments, so we'll break it all down. Now that we're into the middle of the season, they're finally answering some more big questions about Pennywise's history and lore, why he chose the identity of the clown in the first place, also answering some fan theories too. The episode title this week was A Great Swirling Apparatus of Our Planet's Function, which is a reference to the biology teacher's projection reel that he shows them to start to explain who Pennywise is, what his function on planet Earth is, because this episode serves as a really deep dive on his history and lore, and a big lore expansion too from the original book and the movies. Why is it here the entity? How did he get here? Why has he stayed in Derry in particular? That's where the real lore expansion is, why he stayed in Derry this whole time. During the cold open, the episode starts in the 1960s with the Losers Club during this time period on their bikes riding the police station through town. Very Spielbergian shot here, like little kids riding around on their bikes together. Lily and everyone else confesses everything about Pennywise as the kids tell them about the apparitions that they saw without telling them about why they were in the cemetery. This scene is mostly to explain the fog of confusion that Pennywise puts on all the adults' minds, why they never really seem to pay attention to what's happening, why people seemingly don't care about the violence randomly that happens around town. Within the limits of Derry, Pennywise basically has total control over reality. He can actually change things physically, like he can make people see things just on a psychic level, but he can also teleport, he can warp reality. I keep using the Scarlet Witch, Hex, WandaVision references. He's like Scarlet Witch inside the Hex. He can do anything that he wants with time, space, reality. And true to form, Pennywise goes full Westworld here for some of the pictures, so the police don't see anything. This doesn't look like anything to me. Part of the reason why Pennywise does this, or has done this over the different cycles, is to stay hidden so that people don't start poking into him too much, don't start looking for him or trying to stop him. Based on the lore that they introduce with the different shards from the meteorite, the pillars that are trapping him in Derry, I'm assuming that he learned to do this over time, and that's led to the different cycles. Also, the reason for the cycles of 27 years in particular, because he can't feed more frequently, otherwise it would raise more suspicion and cause more people to come and try and stop him. So they're kind of making it seem like the reason why it's 27-year cycles is because that's the maximum that he can feed in this trapped area inside the 13 pillars before things start to become a problem. Like it creates other problems with like the military outside eventually coming to poke into why so many people are disappearing in here. Like how many people can he disappear before it starts to land on the radar of people outside of Derry? It seems like the intro that they used for this episode is the same as the previous episodes. We'll see if it changes later in the season, or eventually if they do a season 2, if they change it for season 2. But at the school the next day, they mentioned Dracula as a possible theory of Pennywise and why he couldn't be captured as an apparition on screen. They're referencing the Bela Lugosi Dracula because this is still the 1960s, but there are a couple other Dracula movies that were released after the Bela Lugosi film. They start to wonder why Pennywise didn't kill them and is just messing with them, setting up some of the reveals later in the episode. They eventually start to put the pieces together, salting the meat, basically making people experience a fear response so that their bodies are flushed with cortisol, which sweetens their taste for Pennywise. They decide to do more research about the history of Derry to learn about the different cycles. This will probably lead them to eventually a Rose's path because she's sort of like the lore keeper for Pennywise. The tribe is basically like the lore keepers for Pennywise, and they do a deep dive at the end of the episode with Tennille, but they'll also probably do one with Rose eventually too when the kids start to put the pieces together. They also use the idea of learning more about the history of Pennywise to Ingrid, Lily's friend from Juniper Hill, which I think everybody at this point thinks is the older version of Kersh, who is also the young girl clown in the 1908 flashbacks. Her clown name was Periwinkle. This is actually the actress who plays that version of the character behind the scenes. Not quite as creepy as Bill Skarsgard as Pennywise, but still very, very creepy. Very good job here. That little girl clown is meant to be the real-life daughter of Bob Gray, who was the original Pennywise the dancing clown that the It entity then took the identity of eventually. So that's why people say Kersh is like the daughter of Pennywise. It's the real version of Pennywise in the context of the show and the movies. There have been a lot of questions about this too, between the books and the way that the movies and now the TV show have changed some of the book, expanded on the lore and the canon. Was Bob Gray just one of the forms that the It entity took originally? Like, did he take a more human-like form? So did the It entity actually have a real-life daughter? Or was Bob Gray a regular human that the It entity then just took the form of when he became Pennywise the Clown? My assumption, just based on everything that the movies and the show have told us, and the show is meant to be canon to the movies, not to the book, is that Bob Gray was a regular, normal human who was Pennywise the Dancing Clown that the It entity then just took the form of eventually, making it sound like Kersh then developed some weird connection with him because of what happened with her and her real father, Bob Gray. There are a couple more references she makes to her father as well, too. A lot of people have also asked about this because the timeline was kind of weird. Based on her seeming age during the episode, she wouldn't be old enough to be that little girl Periwinkle the Clown. My assumption here is that the show will have some way of explaining this, like why is she still alive? Because in the books, they actually do make it canon that Pennywise can give people longer lifespans. You also remember she's supposed to be the old lady that Beverly runs into during It Chapter 2. This is also why she has the pictures of Bob Gray in the background with the little girl. The little girl is her in the 1908 timeline. You also notice here when Ingrid is remembering the 1930s cycle about the missing kids, like, oh yeah, I do remember a ton of kids going missing mysteriously. She has this very, very creepy vibe to her. I think that that will continue, like she will just get creepier and creepier and creepier, and we'll learn more about her connection to the It entity. You also notice that it seems like Mrs. Kersh does not cast a reflection on the mirror next to them in the diner booth, just like Dracula. So it does seem very, very suspicious. Everybody let me know in the comments, do you think that Ingrid is that young girl Kersh, Periwinkle the Clown in 1908, and the reason why she's still looking so young 50 years later is because Pennywise is just extending her lifespan the way that he can do that in the books? She mentions something that her father, Bob Gray, said, with good friends at your side, anything is possible. I think meant to be a reference to all the different versions of losers clubs that we see across the timeline. Like during the episode at the end when we get the full history on Pennywise, It the Entity, we actually see the ancient Native American tribe version of the losers club. Just expect to get way more from Ingrid in the next couple of episodes. Charlotte then learns more about Hank Grogan being sent to Shawshank, which gives her the idea to act as his lawyer. Rose and her nephew then visit, bringing stuff she bought from her store. Notice on the mantle, they start talking about Rose's history in Derry, calling back to the 1908 flashbacks. They also show some of the pictures on the mantle of Charlotte and Leroy Hanlon's ancestors going back generations. It seems like they were also part of the military at various points fighting in previous wars. This whole conversation with Rose talking about her ancestors is meant to set up all of Tennille's flashbacks later in the episode. There are more references to Maturin the Turtle. The women of her tribe are called the Daughters of Maturin. I think the tribe itself is called the Children of Maturin. She makes jokes about manifest destiny and lines on a map because the idea is that Native Americans didn't recognize a lot of the borders that the U.S. government created back when they were claiming the West from them. Rose then tries to suss out more details about the military's Pennywise project and clocks that Leroy's a pilot and they don't know anything about any kind of pipeline happening. She kind of warns Charlotte about Pennywise without telling her literally about the It entity. Bad things happen here in Derry. Keep your loved ones close. Also setting up some of the reveals that Will gives her later. Part of the idea here, especially during this episode, is that Leroy also starts to experience some of this crossover with Pennywise, seeing the balloon a couple different times. So the idea is all these different storylines will converge by the end of the season.
I don't know what the hell it is. Hell, I'm not sure I want to know.
Then we get a look at the abandoned military shed that Shaw said he would give to Hallorann and his men. It looks like it hasn't been used since the 1930s. He winds up getting more visions of Pennywise here. We'll get to that in a second too. More of Pennywise messing with his head, cycling through memories, and a little bit more Shining lore too, with him seeing stuff that happens in the future. At the school, the kids watch another Cold War nuclear bomb duck and cover reel featuring Bert the Turtle, who is the mascot of the school, and also a slight reference to Maturin the Cosmic Turtle. We've actually seen this turtle referenced many times through all the previous episodes because he's the actual mascot of the school, but in context, the Stephen King story, he is also a cosmic turtle, an avatar of God in the Stephen King universe. And it's also a reference to the cosmic turtle Maturin warning the children to watch out for Pennywise. Duck and cover because Pennywise is coming. Will then tells his mother what happened at the cemetery after she finds the pictures. He tells her about Ronnie and Hank, which she believes sort of setting her on that path, and setting up the idea that the family and eventually Leroy will learn about Will's encounters with Pennywise. You also notice during a lot of these conversations that nobody says the word Pennywise, even though Lily has seen the name Pennywise written, so she actually's seen it, but everybody else just thinks of it as an apparition, an entity, something really evil that's coming for them. We also learned that the tribe has a completely different name for the it entity called the Galoo. It would make sense that they would have a different word for it because they encountered it thousands and thousands of years before it ever took the form of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, so they would have been the original group of people to give it a name. When Charlotte talks to Leroy about going out in the town and doing something fun together, I think that might be building towards the Black Spot later this season, just because that's such a big event in the books during this 1960s time period. We'll get to that in a second too. I think there are a couple more things happening with Hank's storyline in the white woman that he talks about that will also lead to that. But we get our next Pennywise attack when he comes for Will while he's fishing at the river with his father. There are a couple references to Leroy's father, like, I'm fishing with you like I did with my father. But Will is bored because he's preoccupied with all the Pennywise stuff that's happening and also because he's more interested in science. I think the reason why Pennywise keeps attacking people when they're alone is because it's easier to scare them. So it's easier to scare Will, salting the meat, again, so to speak, because he's alone without his father. Then the way they explain this is that one of the things that Will is most afraid of is seeing his father during his accident in the Korean War where he got his amygdala taken, like it was destroyed during the war. This is why Will experiences the burnt version of his father, because that's what he thinks he looked like when he got into his accident in Korea. Because of Pennywise's psychic abilities, he'll just find the thing that you are most afraid of and manifest that to you. When the voice says, you'll burn too, that's actually meant to be Bill Skarsgard's voice. You actually hear his full Pennywise voice, like the traditional Pennywise voice, in the episode 5 trailer. So I'll do a video for that next after I post my episode 4 video. Then they do not wait on putting Leroy onto the Pennywise connection with his son. He starts to realize that the thing that he's searching for is the thing that's also been harassing his son. Then you remember, because he doesn't have the amygdala, doesn't have the fear response, when they both see the balloon, if it wasn't clear, Leroy also sees the balloon with Will, so he just gets confused and his mind starts to spin, like his more analytical side starts to connect the dots together until he sees the balloon a second time later in the evening. Balloons are basically meant to be Pennywise's trademark calling card. So if it wasn't clear, Pennywise has fully come back at this point now. He's just going around just messing with people at this point. We go back to the police station. There's a broadcast on the radio talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis heating up. It hasn't hit its climax yet. I'm assuming that by the climax of the actual series, we'll start to get the climax of the Cuban Missile Crisis, so they'll try to weave those things together. Charlotte tries to help Hank Grogan again, then eventually has to go to Ronnie's, and they tease more of the truth about his whereabouts that night. We get the full reveal once she goes back to the police station to actually speak with Hank. Confirming the fan theory that he was in a relationship, it was a white woman, and he thinks that it would cause a worse situation to tell the truth, like whatever's happening now with him being sent to Shawshank Prison, also from the Stephen King stories. Him telling the truth, like whoever this white woman will wind up being, will be a worse situation. Maybe she winds up being one of the prominent members of the town that we've already seen. My early theory is that they'll tie this storyline, like the truth will come out and her husband will probably be part of the Legion of White Decency. Then they'll pay off the big book moment with the attack on the Black Spot by the end of the season. We go back to Hallorann and his men fixing up the shed, and he has another vision of Pennywise. But here's the thing, some of these are visions of the future, like things that he will experience in the future because of Tennille's visions. What he actually sees is the it entity's true form, the Deadlights, in a couple different instances based on the visions that he sees later, interspersed with other visions of his own. So in between these different visions of the Deadlights, he sees the drain. I think it's meant to be a reference to Lily seeing it or hearing it inside the drain. Then he sees his own grandmother in the bathroom, sees same visions of the Korean War than his grandmother on the battlefield that Pennywise made him see earlier when he was in the cistern in his actual lair. You remember that he told Shaw that it seemed like Pennywise was looking through his own memories like flipping pages in a book. It wasn't me inside his mind, it was him inside my mind. So that's kind of what's happening here, but also his grandmother speaking to him, giving him a warning for the future, telling him about some things that will eventually happen. So some of the visions in The Shining are showing him things that he will see in the future. This is why he sees his grandmother appear before him in the woods next to the shed, saying, keep that lid on tight, which is a reference to trapping Pennywise, which will probably be something that they try to do in the future. So part of the idea is that everything he just saw, like all the deadlights, all that stuff, are meant to be from the visions that he sees inside Tennille's mind from his own memories. So technically he's seeing the future, even though it's a vision of the past. Generally, the Shining ability is supposed to allow people to see the future, so this would make sense. Leroy visits them and asks Hallorann about the project because of what happened with Will. Hallorann tries to warn him, and notice when he grabs him, it seems like Hallorann has a vision of Leroy, but doesn't say what he saw when he grabbed him. My assumption is it's probably something that will happen in the future. Maybe an actual encounter with Pennywise himself. But the minute that it happens, you can see that Hallorann connects the dots inside his mind, like, oh yeah, the thing that I'm experiencing here, like all these crazy visions, the warning from my dead grandmother, is the same thing that's coming for your son. The exact same thing that we're poking around Derry looking for. Will and this losers club connect the dots on Pennywise only wanting to scare them, like I explained earlier, salting the meat essentially, but Will explains it in a more scientific type of way. The cortisol response coursing through their veins, actually making them taste differently to people that eat them, particularly Pennywise. If it wasn't clear though, Pennywise can eat people without making them afraid, it just makes them taste better is all. Lily then comes up with the idea to use her mother's medication to stop them from experiencing fear. Mommy's little helper. I love the little joke here too. So it's kind of like temporary Pennywise psychic armor, but it doesn't make them immune from Pennywise. Basically giving them the same power-up that Leroy has, but with chemical means.
Just the second something weird starts to happen, we take it and
hope for the best.
Then their teacher at school shows them another project reel about animal biology, giving them the title of the episode. He says the name of the thing inside the thing. They use this to both set up Pennywise's function on Earth and in Derry, like what does he do, how does he fit into the ecosystem of this area on planet Earth, and to set up Marge's big twist, her big comeuppance. It's meant to be an ironic payoff of what Marge tried to do with Lily, Pennywise doing to her. You see the example of the parasites with the snails and the birds to explain how Pennywise hijacks people's brains before he consumes them, but also Marge is kind of trying to do the same thing with Lily so that the patty cakes could metaphorically consume her for clout. Pennywise then doing a more literal version of this to Marge to actually freak her out. Also a bit of a comeuppance too, just metaphorically. This is actually a big trope of horror stories in general, people being taken down in ironic ways. But I think the whole reason why Pennywise waited to come for Marge till this event here in the bathroom is because Marge is having so much anxiety over tricking Lily. Like, she doesn't want to do it, but she feels like she has to because she wants to be part of the patty cakes. And if it wasn't clear, Pennywise is basically constantly everywhere at all times, like he's that powerful on a psychic level. So he's actually aware of everything that's happening all the time, pretty much everywhere. But the way to actually really get his attention is to experience some really strong emotion. So anytime someone has a lot of anxiety or they're very fearful, then he'll come for them. Like he senses a delicious snack has just popped up. Probably the other important thing here too is you remember because Pennywise can alter reality, he actually makes her eyes grow really large like the snails for real. And she actually does cut them off or portions of them off with the bandsaw. Can't show it in the video here because I don't want YouTube to demonetize the video. My assumption is had Lily not come to save her, like if Marge had been left here on her own, Pennywise would have just popped up immediately because he can teleport instantly pretty much everywhere and just eaten her in this moment. Just gonna have a little snack in the middle of the shop room. The other problem here too is that Lily, even though she probably senses what's happening here, like, oh, Marge is experiencing a vision like I've been experiencing with this crazy entity, she tries to help her, the kids all rush in at exactly the wrong moment, making it seem like she was the person attacking Marge, threatening to send her back to Juniper Hill, like the chances of her getting sent back and committed are getting much, much higher with time. Just seems like there are more excuses for us to go back to Juniper Hill. Also more of this Ingrid storyline at Juniper Hill. Charlotte goes to the police station again, mentioning Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, and Robert F. Kennedy, all people who were critical to the civil rights movements at the time, who would be sympathetic to her cause, but it's all meant to be a bluff, but obviously the police officer doesn't know that. But the idea is that at this point in the timeline, they're all still alive, none of them have been assassinated yet. They make the full reveal on his secret relationship. Like I explained, I think this is going to lead to the Black Spot storyline by the end of the season. Everybody let me know in the comments who you think the woman was, though. I think it's going to be somebody that we've seen in previous episodes. Back at the base, Shaw figures out that they can use Tennille to try and get more information on Pennywise because Rose has figured out what they're doing and is trying to lead them on a wild goose chase. So he uses Hallorann's shining ability to try and get that information on the 13 pillars from Tennille's mind. While they're getting ready for this, there's a little more of Will's storyline where he actually sees another vision of Pennywise through the telescope, and then Leroy sees the second balloon, also throwing him on the path to getting Shaw to tell him more about what's actually going on. Love the way they visualize this whole Shining scene too. It's very Star Trek Spock, Vulcan inspired, like Vulcan mind meld happening here as he touches his hand to his temples.
There was an alien probe.
Captain, I suggest a Vulcan mind probe.
And the way they visualize the Shining ability with him stepping into his mind with the doors, like doors to different memories that he steps through. They use this to give you the full history of Pennywise with the lore expansion on the different 13 pillars made from the shards of the original meteorite that crashed through dimensions from todash darkness, Pennywise or the It entity's original dimension that it came from. Basically Rose telling Tennille as a boy the lore of their tribe. They explain that they call the It entity Galoo, the monster in the Western Wood, which we saw in the 1908 flashback. In the story, it was passed down as a children's tale in their tribe. There are a couple other lore additions here in the circumstances for how Pennywise wound up crashing through dimensions, but I think that's just the way the tribe interprets it. In their version of it, the It entity was exiled from his home dimension, trapped in a meteorite, todash darkness, which is a place in the Stephen King multiverse, bound to the meteorite and cast down to Earth. They do not say why he was trapped in the meteorite in the first place. I think this is just because they want to be relatively nebulous about it. Like, they don't want to expand the lore too much or like too much extra stuff. Stephen King is probably like, please don't do too much here. I think the idea in the original Stephen King It novel was that it was more of an accident, and Pennywise the It entity didn't mean to wind up in the main dimension. It just wound up happening. They show the meteorite crashing to Earth millions of years ago in the area where the Western Wood is, where Derry eventually rose up. We see his true form, the Deadlights, emerge. This is actually more of what Hallorann was seeing in his earlier visions at the military shed. This is why I say he was technically seeing something from the future, but it was a vision of the past. Then, as the tribe explains, the It entity roamed around the area for a long time until Homo sapiens rose up, like the tribe eventually evolved and became a tribe. And there were enough actual beings for it to make better meals of. Now, the It entity can eat anything, any biological form, not just people. It could eat rats or like any types of animals. But I think the idea is that people taste much sweeter to him than animals. He likes the taste of people more than he likes animals. Then their next lore expansion is that the tribe came up with the idea that they could use shards of the meteorite to trap the It entity again. If it trapped it the first time, they could use it to trap it again. They start with a single shard that they used to ward it off when the tribe still lived in the Derry area where it was trapped to the Western Woods. But part of the idea they explain is they show a couple montages, like you see him in the form of the elk. They fight it over a couple generations. There's a couple time jumps. And they explain by the time that settlers arrived to create the township of Derry in the 1700s, saying that they ignored the tribe's warnings, Pennywise fed on that many more people, growing way stronger, way more powerful, allowing it to hunt beyond the Western Woods. Their single shard of the meteorite, like the single dagger here, was not enough to stop him, showing how the tribe would then move away from the Derry area where it lives now, outside of the town, and creating the different 13 pillars with more shards. All to trap it inside the area that then became the Derry town. So this is the really big lore expansion explaining why Pennywise, never left Derry, not because it didn't want to, but now because the show is explaining, at least in the canon of the movies and the shows, that it couldn't leave. This was actually verified by Andy Muschietti on the behind the scenes that they released for this episode, saying that at least in the canon of the show, in the movies now, the idea is that Pennywise would have eventually taken over the entire planet had the tribe not trapped him in the Derry area with the 13 pillars. Stephen King didn't really get into this during the original book. This person in this part of the flashbacks, Seski, I think is meant to be Rose's ancestor, like her daughter is also Rose's ancestor. We actually see her forming what looks like an ancient version of the Losers Club made from her tribe. There's another shot as her mother is being consumed by Pennywise where you see the deadlights emerge. The whole reason why Pennywise took the form of the priest is because that's what the Native Americans were most afraid of the settlers coming and taking their land and killing them. Also goes full Quado Total Recall when a little baby comes out of him to stab her. Then I love the way they transition after this moment too, after we get like the final bit of the lore here with the 13 pillars. Inside of Tennille's mind, Hallorann stops the vision, like he stops time inside the vision and acts kind of like Pennywise does when he's messing with other people. He gives him this very Pennywise-like visage here, like that's the parallel they're trying to draw.
You can tell me.
So when he's questioning young Tennille here, he's actually talking to adult Tennille, but he's visualizing it as his younger self in the memory here. They transition to the adult Tennille as he points outside, giving us our next big Easter egg in our push into more Pennywise in the back half of the season. Their way to find the 13 pillars is under the tunnels in the well house, meaning that next week we're going back to the well house and down into the sewers, which will eventually take them to the cistern, the place where Hallorann saw in his visions where its lair is. So you kind of see they're slowly finding the pillars and then they're slowly converging on the actual cistern where his lair is. You have to remember though, like the big thing in all this is that they can't permakill him, but they can injure him and force him to go back into hibernation for another 27 years. Like that's the best that they can hope for at the end of this series. There was so much new references and lore that they introduced in the episode, so if there's any Easter eggs that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. And everybody let me know how you feel about them expanding the lore with these 13 pillars. I think part of the idea is that they wanted to add stuff to the lore without trampling on the canon of stuff that happens later during the events of the It movies, and this doesn't necessarily do that. But we will see how this works out. Part of the idea, though, is that we will see full Pennywise back in all his glory for the rest of the season, though. What we'll do next is my episode 5 trailer video should be up pretty soon. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. My full episode 5 video will post next week after they release it. Everybody click here for my episode 5 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my Welcome to Derry episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.